Hi, my name is Gibson, and I'm the owner and founder of the Personal Development School. This is your daily breakthrough video, and today I want to talk a little bit about the anxious attachment style and low self-esteem and how to actually correct these patterns of low self-esteem if you're experiencing them. So in order to do that, we have to actually source where the patterns are, because sometimes we'll be like, oh, low self-esteem, we just have low self-worth, we have to, be more confident. And really, there's a lot of roots that are happening beneath this issue that we have to target in order to create real and lasting transformation. So I'm going to show you where the roots of low self-esteem really exist through this video at the subconscious level. And then I'm going to give you some initial tools to really start repatterning some of these habits and patterns that are showing up in your life. Before I dive into all this exciting stuff, I really would love if you guys can give me your feedback and input. I have another video on here that says, I have a question for you. I just uploaded it. And I really want to know, because we are launching all of our online courses at the end of August or first week of September at the latest. And we've been taking all of the courses I've been teaching live and in person, and we've been filming and recording so that they're accessible and available to everybody. The courses, if you're getting a lot of value out of these videos, these courses are going to be like 10 times more valuable, with worksheets and workbooks and really in-depth exercises that are really going to help you reprogram at the root level and really get to the bottom of your challenges. So what I want to know from you is what your preference is between membership options, so that you can have access to more courses, because there's going to be ongoing courses being launched with a ton of different materials to target all kinds of root areas of your life. So self-esteem, attachment, depression, anxiety, procrastination. Like, go take a look at the Personal Development School website, and there are a ton. And I would love to know if you prefer to be a member, and we will have an online forum and everything built together where we can communicate and connect and go through some of the questions you have collectively. And there will be a monthly webinar, all this kind of stuff. Or if you prefer to be able to just purchase the courses individually. So I'm going to base this on a lot of the feedback that I get from you guys, because the whole point of this is to serve your guys' needs and really make sure that this is just as accessible and helpful as possible to as many people as possible. So I would love your feedback if you have any, and you can also feel free to write in the comments below here. And thank you so much in advance for connecting and for helping me with this and for sharing your feedback. So on to this video itself. So anxious attachment style individuals, we know, tend to put other people on a pedestal and tend to sort of diminish themselves accordingly when they are in romantic relationships. So part of where this comes from is that the anxious attachment style, when this attachment style developed at a very young age, they experience this deep need to have their needs met from their caregivers, which we're naturally wired for. But as opposed to the fearful avoidant or dismissive avoidant or secure, they never really deprogrammed or came out of that dependency mode, because they could count on their caregivers enough to meet their emotional needs. But this inconsistency and incongruency was sort of like an intermittent reinforcement. And if you're ever interested, there is a ton of research that discusses how intermittent reinforcement actually creates a tremendous amount of addictive patterns and behaviors. And so sometimes you'll even hear the anxious attachment style referred to as the love addict, right? And intermittent reinforcement, just as an example as well, or just as an analogy, is sort of like gamblers. Like, gamblers are so addicted to that dopamine rush that keeps happening when they, like, let's say, pull the slot machine or play blackjack or whatever it might be, because of that intermittent reinforcement that keeps eliciting this dopamine response. And there's even research that shows that gamblers, people who are addicted to gambling, have more of a high when they think about gambling than when they're actually going through the act of gambling itself. And so I would urge you, if you're the anxious attachment style watching this video, to reflect, like, do you get more out of a relationship from the thought and the fantasy and all the emotional storage that takes place in your imagination and the fantasy of what could happen or what you could want, or how romantic the relationship could be or how connected you could get, or from the relationship itself? Because this will give you a really good idea of where you're at on the health spectrum when it comes to how extreme the anxious attachment piece is for you. So here's, fast forward to adult life, and all of a sudden we are putting other people as the anxious attachment on a pedestal relative to us when we are in relationship. And, a lot of the anxious attachment style individual, they derive a lot of their self-worth in the first place from externally oriented relationships. So, how many friendships they have, how many connections they have, how close they are with other people, how well their romantic relationship is going, how great their partner is. And so there are a lot of these patterns of behavior that show up that are like dramatically impacting self-esteem. And I'm going to tell you some of them. So number one, there's a lot of people pleasing when we get into a romantic relationship. And the people pleasing itself is usually actually to compensate from that perception of us being lesser than, okay? So for example, if I am an anxious attachment person and I put somebody on a pedestal in my relationship next to me, then I have to equilibrate that void. My subconscious mind has something called a homeostatic impulse. It's always seeking equilibration. And so it's trying to close the gap between us and other aspects around us. So if I have somebody on a pedestal, I have to make up for this. So guess what that's going to lead to? A lot of not setting boundaries, a lot of people pleasing, a lot of trying to overcompensate for things. Now, I want you to imagine that you hear these things, okay? So people pleasing, poor boundaries, a lot of fear of losing somebody, and a lot of overcompensating for things. So I want you to imagine that this is you. This is your experience. And now imagine that somebody's trying, like you externalize the relationship to yourself. So now imagine that somebody's following you around all day. This is a voice in your head, right? Your internal dialogue, your thoughts all day. So imagine that you're externalizing those thoughts. So somebody's following you around all day now, and they're like, hey, don't worry about what you want. Just focus on what your partner wants. Because if you don't please them, you might lose them. So you have to make sure that you do everything they want. Who cares about your boundaries? Just let them go, because what really matters is if you're showing up well so that the person still likes you. And if you stop showing up well, and if you become imperfect, you might lose that person because you might not be good enough. Or imagine instead that this person's going, the person following you around all day is going, listen, don't worry about, your needs. Just repress them. Just keep them down. Focus all of your energy onto this person and what they want from you. And then at least you won't end up alone or abandoned. Or if they're going, hey, you're not good enough. So you have to you have to compensate a little bit for this gap between you guys. Like you have to keep showing up more and more. You have to keep doing more. So imagine that this person is following you around all day, and this is how they're speaking to you, and this is what they're asking for from you. How is that person going to impact your self-esteem? They're going to impact your self-esteem really dramatically, right? If you actually believed everything they said and took it to heart and allowed it to elicit an emotional response, which is exactly what's happening when you haven't made yourself aware of these passing thoughts or internal dialogue and the unconscious actions that you're taking, the things that you naturally do. Then if you haven't made this aware, then any of these passing thoughts or actions, when they're on autopilot, your brain is automatically responding to and believing as if they are an absolute truth. So literally, your thinking and your subconscious actions, those things that you're just naturally doing without like premeditating or really being conscious and intentional about them, like overcompensating, for example, all of these things, your subconscious and your psyche are being imprinted with no differently than if somebody was seriously following you around all day, asking you to do these things, okay? So what happens to your self-esteem? Well, I can tell you a few really important things. When you think of yourself as lesser than, thoughts produce emotional responses, okay? The vast majority of the time, not always, but almost always, in order for you to feel an emotional response to something, you first have to have a thought and or belief activated. So thoughts and beliefs produce emotions, not the other way around. Now they can go in a loop where then, emotions then produce more thoughts and then more belief patterns, etc. But if it's like chicken or the egg, it really is this like belief association stored or thought association that's producing the emotional response in our adult lives, okay? So what does this mean? Well, this means that we have to start cleaning up the way that we're thinking about ourselves, the patterns of internal dialogue that we have, which is really the same thing as the way we're thinking about ourselves, and the unconscious actions and behaviors that we are taking. And here's why this is so important. The subconscious mind is programmed through repetition plus emotion. So when we are repetitively acting a certain way and it's eliciting an emotional response, or when we are repetitively thinking a certain way and it's eliciting an emotional response, this is all creating an imprint about how we feel about ourselves. No differently than if somebody outside of us was speaking to us this way or telling us to take these sorts of actions and we were taking them. All of these things would be a diminishment of our self-esteem. So what we want to be able to do is start recognizing these patterns first, because awareness is always the first step to change. So here are the steps I'm going to give you to do to start working on your self-esteem. And again, I have a course coming out in this that is super, super in-depth with a whole bunch of stuff about your needs as well. And it's going to be amazing. Like, all of these courses are super results-oriented. I'm so excited about them. So here are some initial steps that you can take. Number one, write down all of the types of negative thought patterns you have about yourself. This is going to manifest itself as like your internal dialogue, okay? So throughout the day, when you're looking for like what's the word? Like something to help you get started. There's a word for it, but I can't think of it. Go through the 7 areas of life. So what negative patterns do you have about career, okay? Or in the workplace? What negative thought patterns do you catch yourself thinking about yourself in terms of your finances, money, your ability to make money, how you save money, what you feel about money? What negative thought patterns do you have about spirituality? Okay, this can be, oh, I'm not going to church enough. Oh my gosh, I'm not meditating enough. Oh my God, like these sorts of things, these diminishment things in regards to self, okay? Those thoughts, just pausing here for a second, those thoughts like, oh, I'm not doing something enough, in and of itself, they're not bad. But when they are repetitive, because remember, your thoughts elicit emotional responses. Emotions are made up of neurochemical reactions. So if you're thinking thoughts like, oh, I'm not doing enough, you're going to have like a little tiny cortisol and norepinephrine response, which, or you can think of it as like noradrenaline. Like you are going to have, your adrenal glands are literally going to have a little bit of exhaustion happening throughout the day when you have really painful or stressful, let's just say, thinking. So your thoughts are having a physiological response, or are creating emotions that are creating a physiological response for you. So if you're thinking these thoughts repetitively, now you have a problem. If you're thinking them in reflection and sitting down at the end of the evening and going, where can I improve in my life? That's one thing. If these thoughts are just like running on autopilot throughout the day, and we have like roughly 60 to 70,000 thoughts a day, and a good chunk of them are about how you're not doing enough, or you're not this enough, or that enough, which again is very characteristic for the anxious attachment, because there's usually a core wound of not enough, and also for the fearful avoidant. Then if this is what's happening within you, then you're actually tiring your body just from these types of thoughts that are being produced throughout the day on autopilot, okay? So because the subconscious is programmed through repetition plus emotion, through changing these thought patterns intentionally, you will create different emotional responses, and thus you will start to create new programs. This is one very simplistic way of reprogramming. So going back to what we were saying before, you want to track these things so you can be aware of them as they're happening in real time. If you don't sit down and write out all these things and actually reflect first, the analogy I'll use is like if you go into a house and it's a house you've never been in before, and I'm like, go find your way to the back door in the dark. You're going to fumble around that house and try to find the way to the back door and be feeling all the walls and bump into the couches and the tables, and it's not going to be easy. But if I turn on the lights first and I'm like, go look for where the back door is, and you go and you find it with the lights on, and then I say, okay, now come back to the front door. Now we're going to turn off the lights and you're going to look, you're going to find your way to the back door. You're way more likely to find your way around because you've already seen everything in the first place. So this is the same thing for like our conscious and our subconscious. Like if we can bring into the light first these patterns that are running on autopilot throughout the day, we are much more likely to catch them in real time because we're going to be aware of them. And we are much more likely to be able to then reprogram or repattern them in real time once you have the tools from this video or from even more in-depth tools from the course. So go through the 7 areas of life: career, financial, spiritual, mental, emotional, physical, and then relational. So family, social, romantic relationships. And ask yourself, what are all the negative thoughts I think about myself in these areas? And these can be things like, I'm not good enough, and variations of not good enough. I'm not worthy enough. I'm not smart enough. I'm not lovable. I am disliked. I'm not important enough. I don't matter enough. I'm not cared about. Like, go through and really take inventory and try to notice as much as you can. Now, once you have these things written out, okay, maybe it takes 5 or 10 minutes to do, or maybe it takes half an hour if you want to do it in like deep reflection. Then ask yourself what emotions you tend to feel when you're thinking these thoughts. And if you want to, go to the Personal Development School website and refer to the feelings and needs list. So just look at the types of emotions you tend to feel, because again, you're like getting a really clear picture of what experiences are being. You're basically getting a clear picture. Your feelings are going to help you to anchor everything in. When you're aware of your emotions associated with painful thinking, you're much more likely to catch the emotions than the thoughts. I hope that makes sense. So as an example, if I feel overwhelmed when I think I'm running out of time, that's a thought pattern I'm personally working on right now because I'm doing a lot of things. So I'll overwhelm myself with that thought, and then I have to correct that thought pattern because that's not helping me. It's not helping me to stress myself out about time, and instead I have to just, be a little more patient and not try to do so much at once. And so, but if I don't know that I feel overwhelmed when I think that thought, then what happens instead is that thought runs on autopilot. I feel overwhelmed, and this is all happening on like unconsciously throughout the day. And then I come home at the end of the day, and I've had all these thoughts and emotional reactions in relation to different things, and I haven't had a chance to properly process any of them. So find all your thoughts that are related to negative self-talk, negative thinking about self. You can check in the 7 areas of life, or according to some of those patterns or wounds I listed earlier. And then in a column beside, or in a line beside, write down what emotions do I tend to feel when I think these thoughts. You'll see that the emotions come in patterns for you. So you won't feel like different emotions for every single one. You'll usually feel like some very similar sets of emotions. So maybe you feel sad, maybe you feel frustrated, maybe you feel powerless or helpless or angry or trapped or whatever it might be. Write down the emotions, okay? Your emotions are your feedback mechanisms. They're actually there to help you catch these painful thoughts that are being activated. Their purpose is not just to randomly make you suffer. Their purpose is to show you to yourself. And I will go into that in a different video, but it's a really important distinction to make. Now, once you've done this, I want you to create a new thought that you'd substitute with instead. So because you'll catch it in real time. So let's pretend you're driving and you catch yourself thinking a thought. I want you to create a substitution thought. And it has to be something that you believe. It has to be something that resonates with you. So it might be something like, let's pretend you're telling yourself, I'm not smart enough to be with this person, okay? Let's say you're in a relationship and you're telling yourself, oh, I'm not smart enough, or this person's smarter than me, or whatever it might be. Your substitution thought might be something like, listen, I'm a smart person, I'm learning, I'm working on myself, intelligence expresses itself in different ways. The whole thought itself might just be something your brain's believing that is not true whatsoever, but that's up to you. And you want to find a space where you can tell yourself that either you are as smart, you have to notice your intelligence. Honestly, my true belief about intelligence is that everybody is basically equally intelligent, but that our intelligence expresses itself in very different forms. Some people are polarized in one area. Their intelligence is in science or in math, or some people's intelligence is around people or around their creativity or art. So try to notice where your intelligence is, and then try to, have positively oriented thoughts that are helping to equilibrate the negative. We're not here to just positively think and just tell ourselves positive lies. We are trying to equilibrate some of these negative patterns that our thoughts are eliciting so that we create some balance. And we're not here to believe that we're smarter than everybody else. We're just here to not believe that we're less than everybody else, okay? So if you have a wound around, let's pretend not smart enough, and it's -8, you kind of need +8 in terms of where you are smart, how you are smart, you're trying to equilibrate. And as you do that over time, you'll actually wire in an entirely new program, because remember, the subconscious is programmed through repetition plus emotion. It's really repetitive thought that elicits an emotional response. So this is how we program. It's one way, at least. This is a way of reprogramming. So I want you to try to notice all these thoughts and then work on this. And I don't want to make this video too long, so I'm not going to go in too much to the actions, but I really want you to take inventory as well, if this is you and you're anxiously attached, of how you show up for yourself at the behavioral level. So we have different things that are impacting us and how we feel all day. There are beliefs, our thought patterns, our emotional reactions that are occurring in patterns themselves, and our actual physical actions. Okay, and a lot of these actions are done what I would call unconsciously, like you're stressed and you just eat, and you know that you're eating, but you're kind of on autopilot or in a trance-like state. These are subconscious or unconscious actions being taken. So take inventory of those things where you show up negatively towards yourself or unfairly towards yourself in relation to your romantic relationship partner or with other people. So this could be things like, I put everybody's needs first and I put my needs last, or when I don't feel like going out, I go out anyways to appease people. Like, so take inventory, and then I want you beside it to create a healthier action step for yourself you will start committing to taking instead. So for example, if it's that you go out with other people when you're tired and you don't feel like it and you have to get up for work early the next day, what's a better action I can take here instead? Maybe the action is to communicate a boundary, or to try to do this one time less a week, or one time less a month, or something that you feel like you can commit to and start building positive momentum from. You don't have to like conquer everything in one day. It's more important that we take small actionable steps that resonate with us, that then we can build positive momentum and positive associations in regards to. So I hope this wasn't too much information jam-packed into one video, but this is a really great place to start in terms of self-esteem and in terms of actually touching on repatterning and reprogramming. And this also can be used for the fearful avoidant, for the dismissive avoidant, for somebody secure that just has some self-esteem challenges. So please check in, go through this work. Let me know if you have any questions, and thank you so much for watching. I really look forward to getting to know all of you more and more as time goes on and through these courses and through questions, and I super appreciate all the comments and all the engagement. You guys are amazing. Thank you so much.